In this video, we're going to take a look at what 3ds Max refers to as the transformation gizmo. Now, before we actually get into how it works, we probably ought to get a little more comfortable with what the word transformation actually means. It's really just a fancy term that's used to describe either moving, scaling, or rotating something in a scene. So whenever you hear the word transform, think of it in a general way, simply a term to describe one of three different operations, either move, rotate, or scale. Okay, let's see what we can do. When you want to transform an object, you're going to be given three different directions to choose from: up and down, left to right, and forward and back. All 3D programs actually use a series of letters to identify those directions, those letters being X, Y, and Z. For now, though, we're just going to keep it real simple. Here's how it works. When you enter a specific transformation command, like move for an example, a little three-colored icon will pop up on top of the object you have selected. That icon is what Max calls the transformation gizmo, sometimes also referred to as the transform gizmo or just plain gizmo for short. That gizmo, whatever name you give it, will then be your control for moving your object around. Now, you may recall in a previous video that I mentioned the gizmo works kind of like a compass, in that it allows you to easily identify the three directions in which you can work. Notice the gizmo is color-coded, with each direction you can transform in being designated by a different color. So red identifies one direction, green identifies another, and blue a third. By the way, the gizmo can be resized by using the plus and minus signs on your keyboard. Plus to make it larger, the minus sign to reduce it in size. As a general rule of thumb, you don't want your gizmo so small that it becomes difficult to use, or so darn large that it takes up most of your screen. So use some common sense if you do decide to resize it. I've made it a little larger, for example, here, simply so it's a little easier to see. If you look close, you'll notice that those three-letter directions that I mentioned a little earlier are at the end of each arrow. There's a little X at the end of the red arrow, a little Y at the end of the green, and a little Z at the end of the blue. Those three colors, red, green, blue, and those three directions, X, Y, and Z, don't change. The color red will always identify the X direction. Green will always identify Y, and blue will always represent which direction Z points. So remember that. Red, green, blue, RGB, equals XYZ. Now get this, the colors won't change, but the look of the sticks will, all depending on which transformation command you're in. So when the move command is active, the gizmo will look one way. When the rotate command is active, it'll look another. And when you've activated the scale transform, it'll look different still. Max does that so you always know what mode or command you're working in while working. So that's what the gizmo looks like, but how is it specifically used? Well, here's the deal. Once you've selected your object and activated the appropriate transformation command, you'll then decide which direction you want to move that object in. Once that's done, you simply look at the gizmo and choose the stick whose color goes in that direction. You then grab that stick, and away you go. Notice how when your mouse is on a particular stick, that stick turns yellow. This is Max's way of letting you know which way or which direction it's ready to work. If a stick isn't yellow, it's essentially been turned off, meaning that you're currently locked out of going in that direction. So got that? If you want to transform an object in a particular direction, the stick pointing in that direction has to be yellow, or activated in other words. It's all how you grab the gizmo. Sometimes it's ready to work going only in one direction. Other times, depending on how many sticks you've lit up, it'll work in multiple directions. You'll be getting plenty of practice using both techniques. Just remember this, how an object is moved, scaled, or rotated all boils down to how you grab the gizmo. It's also important to be aware that unless you're officially in a transformation command, that little gizmo won't be showing up. You'll only find it on the screen once you've entered your transform command. So activate the command you're aiming to use first, then go looking for the gizmo. Now, there's going to be times when you're working that you find the gizmo actually getting in the way. In a case like that, you can hide the gizmo by hitting the X key on your keyboard. You can also do that by going up to the Views pull-down menu and turning off or on Show Transform Gizmo. Now, it's pretty easy to sometimes hit the X key by mistake. So if you're in the middle of a transformation command and the gizmo isn't showing up on the screen for some reason, Just hit X and it'll pop back up. So that's pretty much it. Select your object, activate the needed transform command, choose the stick or ring on the gizmo that gets you going in the right direction, and get down to moving things around.